Welcome to the third episode in a Legendarium series about the Roman Apocalypse. In part 3, the Vandal Sack of Rome, we will talk about the rise of the Vandal Kingdom in North Africa and how it took advantage of civil upheaval in Rome to invade Italy and loot the Eternal City. Throughout the 30-year reign of Emperor Valentinian III, a top Roman priority had been retaking the former Roman provinces in North Africa. In the late 300s, the Vandal nation had been forced to leave their homeland in Pannonia, modern-day Hungary, by the Huns. Throughout the early 400s, they migrated across the Roman Empire and eventually settled in modern-day Spain. There they engaged in a bloody war with the Visigoths over the Roman provinces in Iberia, like jackals fighting over the corpse of Roman glory. The Visigoths would win this struggle, and in 429, King Gizeric of the Vandals led his nation across the Strait of Gibraltar into North Africa. Supposedly, Gizeric had come to Africa by invitation from the local Roman governor who had a falling out with the imperial family. Unfortunately, the governor soon had a falling out with Gizeric and his Vandals, who in turn began seizing towns and taking over Roman North Africa. When they took the city of Carthage in 439, they also took control of most of the Roman fleet. For the first time since Carthage, over 500 years ago, Rome faced a naval rival in the Mediterranean Sea, and that rival proved very successful. King Gizeric sent his fleets to Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, and the Balearic Islands. The Vandals treated these islands like their own personal banks, making withdrawals at sword point every summer. But eventually, they decided to simply settle and take over the islands. Emperor Valentinian III, with no manpower to spare from his wars in Gaul, chose to reconcile with the Vandal king. He married one of his daughters to King Gizeric and ceded him the provinces of Mauritania and Numidia. It is worth noting that Germanic migrants like Gizeric did not come to destroy the Roman Empire, but to take it over. Germanic migrants like Gizeric saw the Mediterranean as an El Dorado, where you could go to live the good life. Gizeric himself styled himself as a miniature emperor ruling from Carthage. Indeed, the local Roman population, at least after the initial shock of the invasion, found themselves better off than they'd been under Rome. They enjoyed greater religious freedom, lower taxes, and continued to enjoy the benefits of trade with the wider Mediterranean world. However, things changed for the worse in the year 454. In that year, Emperor Valentinian III murdered his greatest soldier, Flavius Aetius, in the fear that Aetius would replace him. Some of Aetius's angry soldiers were recruited by a senator named Petronius Maximus, who held a grudge against Valentinian, supposedly because the emperor had forced himself upon his wife. After the murder of Valentinian III, Petronius Maximus took power in large part by bribing palace officials to make him the new emperor. However, almost everyone in Rome knew how Petronius Maximus had come to power. To give his regime a semblance of legitimacy, he married Emperor Valentinian's widow, Licinia Eudoxia. His men literally dragged her to the altar, and she was forced to marry the man who murdered her husband. Needless to say, Eudoxia soon turned on her new husband and called upon Gizeric the Vandal to avenge the murder of her husband. Gizeric himself reasoned that his treaty had been with Valentinian, and since Valentinian had been murdered, he was now free to wage war upon Rome again. It was as if Hannibal took revenge upon Rome 500 years after his death, as the fleet which would deal a death blow to Rome would come from his home city of Carthage. Once word came that the Vandal fleet was sailing to Italy, utter panic erupted within the city. Petronius Maximus himself attempted to flee Rome under the cover of night. However, as he attempted to cross a river, somebody noticed him, and an enraged mob pursued the cowardly emperor. Only 3 months into his reign, a shouting, stomping, screaming mob stoned Emperor Petronius Maximus to death. However, the murder of the cowardly emperor would not change the fact that the Vandal fleet was coming. Everyone feared for their life. And with no one to take charge or organize the defenses, soldiers still in the city began to mutiny, using the chaos as an opportunity to loot. Anybody who had the means fled to the countryside, but most people did not have that choice. When the Vandals landed in May of 455, the first thing they did was knock out the aqueducts that supplied Rome with water. Within a few days, the Romans had drained the fountains within their city. People were reduced to drinking urine and tearing apart animals to drink their blood. The only authority remaining in the city was Pope Leo I, who met with Gizeric the Vandal at the gates of Rome. The Pope begged Gizeric to spare the lives of those within the city, and instead invited him to take all of the treasure within Rome's walls. Gizeric agreed to these terms, and in exchange, Leo assured Gizeric peaceful entry through the gates of Rome. For 2 weeks, from June the 2nd to June the 16th, 455, the Vandals did horrific damage to the city. For comparison, Alaric's sack of Rome in 410 lasted for only 3 days compared to Gizeric's 14. Vandal soldiers freely entered the houses of senators, helping themselves to clothes, gold, silver, horses, and draining the wine cellar dry. They even tore the bronze roof tiles from the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus in the belief that they were made of gold. Romans could only watch in horror as Vandals ripped the beating heart out of what they considered to be the civilized world. The Vandal ransacking of Rome was so severe that it gave us our word vandalism. The daughter of Empress Eudoxia, also called Eudoxia, was forced to marry the son of King Gizeric of the Vandals, and when Gizeric died in 477, the younger Eudoxia would become queen of the Vandals. The former Empress Eudoxia and her other daughter Placidia went to Carthage for a few years, but were soon sent back to Constantinople. However, thousands more were not nearly as lucky. They were herded through the streets of Rome and forced to march through the gates. After a march through miles of Italian countryside, the last glimpse any of them would have of their homeland, they were forced into the waiting Vandal ships. After 2 or 3 weeks in the hot, sticky holds of Vandal ships, they were unloaded in Carthage. One by one, they were prodded onto raised wooden platforms and sold as slaves. After the Vandal sacking of Rome in 455, no emperor would again rule in his own right. Instead, emperors would be ruled by Romanized barbarians who used them as puppets in a last desperate attempt to keep the Roman flame from being snuffed out. We'll learn more about that in the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this installment of the Legendarium. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.